YouTube, what is going on? Scenario Talk 23. I'm back with another video. Before we get into the video, YouTube, I need you to hit the like, comment, and subscribe button. Put on that post notification bell while you at it. Oh, today we got it's like a documentary / crime. It's called The Story of Action Park. Let's get straight into it.
On the 26th of May, 1978, a new attraction opened in the township of Vernon, New Jersey. For the next 20 years, this unassuming US town would be the home to Action Park, a theme park and water park that would soon become notorious for its terrible safety record. Before the sale of the park to new owners in 1998, 6 guests would have died while riding its insanely unsafe attractions, and many hundreds more would have sustained serious injuries.
6 people died at one park. That shit should have been closed.
Action Park was the brainchild of Eugene Mulvihill, owner of Great American Recreation. The company already operated a ski area, but Mulvihill wanted to expand the business so that they could generate revenue during the summer as well. To do this, he added an alpine slide down one of the ski slopes, as well as 2 water slides and a go-kart track. Action Park was born, although during its first year of operation, it traded under the less exciting name of Vernon Valley Summer Park. The adoption of the name Action Park and the addition of more rides took place over the next 2 or 3 years. The park hit its peak in the early and mid-1980s. At this time, over 1 million people per year were flocking in to ride around 75 different rides and water slides. At the time, the park had not yet garnered a reputation as unsafe, but injuries were frequent. The alpine slide, the first ride ever to be installed, was one of the worst culprits when it came to injuring guests. This 820-metre or 2,700-foot slide consisted of a channel made from concrete, fiberglass and asbestos, down which tiny wheeled carts would be dispatched. The carts were operated by the riders, who were required to pull a lever to apply the brakes when approaching sharp turns or getting too close to other carts. These brakes, however, didn't always work, and weren't always applied correctly by guests. Carts frequently jumped the track. Riders, most of whom were only wearing bathing suits, suffered severe abrasions all over their bodies from the surface of the slide, and many were concussed or broke limbs. In 1984 and 1985, the alpine slide alone was responsible for 14 fractures and 26 head injuries.
Damn.
Another infamous ride was the super go-karts. Again, guests were in control of their own ride vehicles as they piloted single-seater buggies around a concrete track. The go-karts came with a speed limiter, but this could easily be circumvented by wedging a tennis ball in the right spot, something many employees would happily do for guests that requested it, or even for those who didn't. With the limiter disabled, the carts could travel at up to 80 kilometers per hour, 50 miles per hour. Crashes, when they happened, frequently resulted in very serious injuries. Worse yet, even riders who escaped injury were often made sick by the petrol fumes from the poorly maintained engines of the carts. The park's water rides were also responsible for some grave injuries. The Cannonball Loop, for example.
This is a water slide. If I see this a loop in a water, what the hell am I? Bro, you know how much speed you gotta get to even make the loop. Nigga, if you slow, doop, your head gon' crack. Bruh, they ain't give a damn.
In so many injuries that it was actually shut down after just one season. The ride consisted of an enclosed water slide similar to those elsewhere in the park, but with one crucial difference. There was a vertical loop at the bottom.
Right.
There's a reason that loops are not commonly seen on water slides. They are incredibly dangerous. If a rider didn't have sufficient speed to complete the full loop, they would usually stall out at the top and then fall straight down, smashing into the inside wall of the flume. Broken noses and back injuries were the predictable result.
That's fucked
If you want to be on camera, you want to be behind the camera, you want to do radio, podcast, whatever it is.
The main danger to patrons enjoying the wave pool, on the other hand, wasn't blunt trauma, but instead drowning. This attraction, common at other water parks, consisted of a large pool and a machine that generated sizable waves. This type of attraction is often mildly dangerous, but at Action Park it was deadly. Lifeguards there sometimes had to rescue as many as 30 people in a single weekend.
too much.
This frightening statistic was down to the design of the pool. The waves were extremely large and powerful and tended to wash patrons towards the deep end of the pool. Many would be surprised when they suddenly found themselves out of their depth. Added to this was the fact that Action Park would cram as many as 1,000 people into the pool. When the waves began getting rough, there would often be such a scramble to exit the pool that people would be injured clambering over one another on the ladders to escape. Those are just some of Action Park's poorly designed attractions. Others included the Tarzan swing, a gigantic swing which patrons were required to let go of at just the right time, or risk smashing into concrete on the far side of the splash pool. That splash pool, by the way, was so cold that riders often couldn't swim out and had to be rescued.
This shit sound like
There were
trap.
also diving cliffs with no warning or barriers to prevent swimmers from passing by underneath, multiple slides with very low barriers on either side and a deadly drop should you skip those barriers, and a super speedboats ride which inebriated patrons would often turn into a bumper boats experience with predictably injurious results. As an aside, it's no surprise that many of these rides were dangerous. They were built, for the most part, by people with very little engineering knowledge or experience, and safety tested mainly by trial and error. Employees were offered cash incentives to be the first to try out new rides, and once a few employees had survived an experience, it was usually declared safe and opened to the public.
What?
In this climate of almost negligible regulation, injuries were inevitable. Action Park justified its high injury count with a simple philosophy, that the guest was in charge. Many attractions required riders to follow instructions, steer vehicles, keep themselves afloat, or make split-second decisions about whether to jump, dive, or get out of the way. When guests were injured in the course of riding an attraction, the park would inevitably claim that the guest was at fault for failing to follow the rules, riding in the wrong position, or overestimating their ability to swim in rough waters. This laissez-faire attitude ultimately had deadly consequences. Over the course of 10 years, 3 guests drowned in the wave pool, earning it the macabre nickname of the Grave Pool. Another guest suffered a cardiac arrest and died after plunging into the cold water beneath the Tarzan swing. And a 19-year-old slipped into a coma and died after being thrown from the alpine slide and hitting his head on a rock. death number 6 occurred on a ride called the Kayak Experience in 1982. This ride consisted of an imitation white water course, which guests would ride in single-seater kayaks. These kayaks would often get stuck or tip over, requiring guests to climb out and stand in the water to right them again. A 27-year-old man was doing just this when he stepped on a metal grating that, due to exposed wiring, had become electrified. He went into cardiac arrest and later died. You might wonder why a park like this was allowed to go on existing. In today's regulatory climate, Action Park would, thankfully, be shut down within a season. Back in the 1980s, however, regulations were far more lax, and information about ride safety was not readily available to the public. Although the park had a reputation as being a somewhat risky day trip, most visitors probably never knew the true extent of the danger. Many lawsuits were brought against the park, but few were successful. Nonetheless, the mounting cost of defending itself from claims was what ultimately began the park's decline. This, combined with a recession in the early 1990s, left Action Park severely short on funds. In an effort to save money during the 1995 season, the park operated without insurance. This desperate cost-cutting bid just wasn't sufficient. In 1996, Great American Recreation, the owners of Action Park, were forced into bankruptcy. The park closed as usual at the end of the 1996 season and did not reopen the next year.
That shit lasted to the 90s though? That shit should have been shut down.
That was the end of Action Park. After substantial investment, a Canadian resort developer did reopen the park, but under a different name, and with all of the dangerous attractions removed or altered to be made safe. It's now known as Mountain Creek Water Park, and has operated without major incident for many years. The strangest thing about Action Park is that, despite irresponsible owners, dangerous rides, multiple fatalities, and thousands of injuries, it is still remembered by many who visited it with great fondness. Journalist Chris Gethard summed up the general feeling about Action Park in an article for Weird NJ. Action Park was a true rite of passage for any New Jerseyan of my generation. When I get to talking about it with other Jerseyans, we share stories as if we are veterans who served in combat together. I suspect that many of us may have come closest to death on some of those rides up in Vernon Valley. I consider it a true shame that future generations will never know the terror of proving their grit at New Jersey's most dangerous amusement park.
Ain't no grit. Y'all can have it. What you mean?
Action Park has become a myth, an urban legend. Yes, it was the cause of a great deal of pain and grief, but, as bizarre as it might seem, many happy memories were also made at Action Park.
Weird. See, my thing with the Action Park is after the first death, they should have been sued, whatever. They should have been shut down. Because ain't no way y'all let 6 people die. And this park lasted for at least almost 16, 17, almost 20 years this park lasted and it wasn't shut down. They just let the bodies keep building up, I guess. But YouTube, if you're rocking with the channel, leave me a like, comment, and subscribe. Catch me on the next one.